This is episode 306 of jumbleThink.
T minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to jumbleThink, where we interview dreamers, makers, innovators, and influencers all about their journey of turning their dreams and ideas into reality. Along the way, we're going to share some tips on how you can turn your own dreams and ideas into reality too. Our guest on today's show is Robin Dreeke. More about Robin in a moment. Whether you're a new listener or a longtime fan, if you've never subscribed to jumbleThink, head on over to your favorite place to listen to podcasts, search for jumbleThink, and click that subscribe button. Now let's jump into today's episode. Hey there, welcome to jumbleThink. My name is Michael Woodward. I am your host, and we have a very special episode lined up for you today. Our guest is a guy named Robin Dreeke. Robin entered federal law enforcement in 1997 after graduating from the U.S. Naval Academy and serving in the U.S. Marine Corps. He received advanced training and operational experience in social psychology and the practical application of the science of relationship development. Robin eventually rose to direct the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program of the FBI and recently retired as an agent of the FBI. He is the author of It's Not All About Me and the Code of Trust. I am super excited about this conversation because we talk about his new book called Sizing People Up, a veteran FBI agent's user manual for behavior prediction. We're going to go deep into this topic, but we're also going to hear some stories about Robin's time when he was an FBI agent during September 11th in New York City. The book is fascinating. Our conversation's a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and join our conversation with Robin Dreeke. Robin, thanks so much for being on.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me on. I'm very appreciative of it.
We were talking offline before we jumped online. I've been reading your book. I'm not the whole way through. I'm loving every moment of it. It's this marriage of stories with teaching and tips and practical application, examples, really well written, very informative, and I love the story. So I'm excited about this conversation.
Oh, thanks so much. I'd love to take full credit for everything I do, but as everything in life, and we'll probably talk about this during the chat too, it takes a village. Everything's about relationships, and I had a great team working with me on this book. I'm very proud of it.
I think collaboration is one of the most underrated tools in our arsenal, whether it's in business, whether it's in life. We often feel like we have to be the Lone Ranger, the hero that saves the day, and truly that's rarely the actual story. And I know that's the story you tell throughout this book, is that part of sizing people up and behavioral prediction is all about collaboration. You are building relationship. The book is called Sizing People Up, a veteran's FBI agent's user manual for behavioral prediction. All right. I am hearing and seeing all over the place right now this conversation all about persuasion. I think at times most people don't know the difference between persuasion and manipulation. And your book is about the step before the process of relationship. It's about understanding what you need to do to get into the right relationships, understanding how to craft relationships. So tell us a little bit about what the book's about.
Yeah, so the book is a natural evolution from what I've been doing my entire life and career and what we all do. And that is we try to, better ourselves and be prosperous. And so my job inside the FBI when I was running the behavioral team was to recruit spies. And so believe it or not, that is an anti-manipulation, anti-subterfuge or anything deception-wise, because you have to build, good, honest, trusting relationships. And so what I found is, because I'm, a Naval Academy graduate, Marine Corps officer, FBI guy, I am the very typical hard-charging type A. And if you have that kind of personality type, you're going to fail majestically at building relationships because, like you said at the very beginning, you think it's all about me and me succeeding. Well, you can't succeed at anything unless you have healthy relationships. Right. It's the cornerstone for everything. So my last book was The Code of Trust, which is what behaviors do you need to exhibit in order to inspire trust in others. And this one, what I found is that required so much focus on the other person that other people started becoming predictable because I was so focused on the guarantee in life that, what makes human beings so predictable is that all human beings were biologically and genetically coded to act in our own best interest in terms of safety and security and prosperity for ourselves and our families. And so all I need to do is figure out what you think is in your best interest for safety, security, and prosperity, and I now know what you're going to do. And so this was an evolution of that, and the purpose of it is not so I can know exactly what you're going to say every minute of the day. The purpose of it is so I can always manage my expectations of what I can reasonably expect you're going to do in terms of our relationship, so that I never get angry, resentful, discontent. In other words, I never have negative emotions associated with you because I'm always understanding what I can expect you're going to do.
One of the things that stood out to me as I read the book, taking and going a step further here, is that there's a difference between morality and prediction of behavior. There's a difference between likability and trust in behavior, and that our society gets it wrong. If I like them, I must trust them. Right. And you make a great picture where you say, hey, if you get on a plane and your doctor's flying, you may like them, you may trust them, but that's not the area to trust them. And if you walk into brain surgery and your pilot's standing there, you may like him and you may trust him to fly a plane, but you don't trust him to open up your head. It's a completely different thing. And I think many of us get entangled in putting our trust in things that aren't really markers of trust. So walk us through untangling that.
Yeah, that thing called intuition, it's, I had a great conversation with someone about this yesterday. The first thing people like to try to assign trusting someone to is if they like them or not. And like you just said, those examples are fantastic ones. And unfortunately, what generally happens with people is you generally like someone based on similar morals and ethics and commonalities of background or other things like this. And that's nice that you like them, but that doesn't have anything to do what I can reasonably predict they're going to do in each of these different situations, because those are a different set. That's why we came up with the 6 signs of assessing behavior, so I could actually make it a cognitive, thoughtful process in each of these different lanes, because just liking someone, it really skews the data on everything. I mean, just think politics right now.
Yeah, it's a little polarized out there, isn't it?
Well, here's a great way to kind of understand it without even taking a side on anything, or we don't have to sign names. So just think about one of the most well-known individuals that's ever run for a public office. Before he even ran for office, he was so well-known that people either liked him or didn't like him. Right. And now, from that viewpoint alone, if you didn't like him, I guarantee you everything he says or does is completely wrong to you. Regardless of facts or data, just because we have that liking or and contrary, the same way, if you like him, everything he's doing is perfect.
It's a presupposition. It's a worldview based on that experience.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And so what I say is, and those are fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but it's not fact based, and so that's why I try to maintain because those things, we start reacting to the world around us and get very emotional. And again, when we start getting over emotional, I call it crazy brain. The negative emotions where you hit fight or flight. That's when we no longer can see the healthy relationships around us to move us forward to whatever we're trying to do and achieve.
Well, you talked about intuition, and you talked about how often we're relying on that gut feeling. And I want to figure out, is there a way to balance that between the data and the emotion? Because emotion doesn't tell us facts, it tells us feelings. And sometimes that's right. Sometimes you have to be able to rely on the gut in moments where you have to. But I even think of your stories. You had a colleague that would help guide you in your early days named Jesse. And it seemed like he was more intuitive in how he paced himself, and you were more analytical in the way you processed through. Talk to us a little bit about how you can balance those people who really have strong intuition with them becoming more fact-driven and data-driven, and vice versa when you're in those moments and you're very driven by data, and you have to come in and make a split-second judgment based on on the intuition and the best data you have?
Sure. The other side of intuition, and I'm sorry I forgot to talk about it, add it here. So you have liking, and then you have the other side that Jesse was very good at, and that a lot of human beings are very, very good at. And that's a side where we're looking for congruence between the words being spoken and the emotions and the nonverbals are giving off. And that's what Jesse was really good at. His intuition was basically he was reading, does this person saying what they're saying, and do their emotions back up what they're saying? In other words, we all know when we walk into work any given day of the week, who's having a bad day without anyone even saying a word, because they're deviating from their baseline of what normal looks like. And that's what a lot of people are doing. So that's part of intuition. So I think the important thing is, don't discount any of your intuition. Just try to see and assess where it's coming from. Is it coming from me simply liking someone because we have similar interests and backgrounds? Or is it because I'm actually seeing that they're actually sincere and genuine in what they're saying because their nonverbals are congruent with what the words are coming out? So that becomes part of the whole. So I definitely don't discount it. But I think assessing why you have those emotions is the thing I was always asking myself. Because, we've all been around great leaders and bad leaders. I like to understand why I think someone's great and figure out those behaviors so I can imbue them in myself. And I also like to understand why I don't like someone as a leader and see what they're missing, so I make sure I don't do those similar things. And so I always ask that why question.
Yeah, which is such an important question to ask. I think back to a good friend of mine. His son came to him one day and said, "Dad, you've only taught me two things, how to do things well and how to do them poorly." And I think that that's the core there, is that all people have the ability to surprise you in those reactions, but there's a predictability based on experience. You, though, say that experience isn't always the best marker for actually being able to predict people. Their past, while a good indicator, doesn't always live up to current situations.
Right. And if it doesn't, that's sign 4 is actions, past patterns of key behaviors. In general, though, if I see and observe someone doing 3 or 4 things the same way multiple times, then the likelihood of them continuing to do it that way is pretty predictable, unless there's an outside stimulus that causes a change. And so here's the good thing. If I don't take into account you as a human being and focus on you, and all of a sudden you go sideways on what I'm expecting you to do, a lot of times that's when we get angry and resentful and all those negative emotions. And so what I'm saying is, if you pay attention and now you're reasonably expecting someone to do something and they don't perform in that thing that you're predicting, then actually now you don't get angry or resentful. You become curious about the human being, because this whole process develops massive empathy and understanding. And so now you can say, all right, something happened here in your life. What can I do to be a resource for you overcoming it?
It's moving past that me against them mentality and really being able to step into their shoes and say, oh, how arrogant is it for me to say I would never be like that, or I'd never do it? I don't have the same situations, the same experiences, the same conditioning. And that's a lesson I think more of us, all of us probably, and Western philosophies need to learn in such trying times as we're in right now.
And you hit the key crux of this entire thing, is that's called ego suspension. I talk about it in the Code of Trust. I talk about it in Sizing People Up. This entire process of understanding others requires a massive ego suspension and losing any sense of superiority that you have over others. I spent 21 years of learning how not to take a side, because it's so funny. My job every day was to protect national security of the United States.
Yeah.
And that means you have to talk to everyone. And anytime a conflict, I don't know if anyone in the world knows this, but, anytime a conflict in the world ever broke out between the United States and that country, the FBI is tasked with interviewing everyone from that country that's in the United States. Wow. to try to build relationships for information and intelligence that can protect, our people overseas and domestically. And so if you go, like I remember when the Iraq war broke out, again, non-political, but, we have to go interview everyone that might be on a visa, might be here as an immigrant, everyone. And if you go in and knock on someone's door with an idea of you placing judgment on them in any way, are they going to talk to you? No, I guarantee you they won't, because you're judging. And so you learn to not judge, but to understand the context, because that's one of the key steps in life, I think, is understanding context of another human being. Because like you said, walk a mile in my shoes and see what kind of decisions you'd make.
Yeah.
Because here's a guarantee of human behavior. We're all seeking and craving to be affiliated with meaningful groups and organizations and to be valued by the same. Because if you're affiliated and being valued, we're going to survive, because again, we're genetically coded to want to belong to groups and organizations and be valued. So if, as long as you're demonstrating those two things to another human being, you're going to start building trust, and you're going to start building a relationship, and you're going to start being able to predict, where the relationship's going.
Can you walk us through the 6 steps of this book?
Sure. So sign 1 is vesting. Vesting is nothing more than, is this person taking actions that are not only in their best interest, but also in your best interest as well? Are they mutually vested in your success as well as their own? Second sign is longevity. Are they using words, actions, and indicators that are saying that they see this relationship going longer beyond just a quick quid pro quo? Are they, involving you outside of work events? Are they, creating customs and traditions with you, like going out to coffee every Friday? So that's longevity. Reliability. This is, are they capable of what they're doing, and do they have the persistence to follow through on it? Basically, are they qualified for the things they say they're doing, and do they have the diligence to do it? Actions, we talked about that. That's sign 4. Past patterns of key behaviors. That's where if I observe someone doing something a few times, the likelihood of doing it, the same way a few more is pretty high. 5 is language. So one of the ways that we demonstrate value and affiliation to others is we do these 4 things if we want to do this very well. You seek their thoughts and opinions. You talk in terms of their priorities. You validate them without judging them, and you give them choices of appropriate. So one of those 4 things, that's what we do to demonstrate value and affiliation. So now language, are they using that kind of language with us? And then 6 is stability, emotional stability. Under times of duress and stress and all that, do they maintain emotional stability, and can they cognitively think their way through challenges, or do they just emotionally react and bounce off the walls?
Lots of good stuff in there, and layers upon layers of conversation. I love that your book peels those back, and I love that in the book you get through a section and you kind of lay out what's happening, but then you get to an example. You have a date there, you'll have a marker of a specific event, and as you go through, you actually put those traits in parentheses behind the action. And I love that, because it not only can you pick it up just by reading it, but you can actually then say, "Oh, I get it." Right.
Yeah, it was. It was the most complicated book I think I've ever written, because it took a lot to keep going through and keep it all organized. Because, like you said, every chapter, those 6 signs, each one of those 6 signs, I have 10 behavioral tells that demonstrate it, and 10 behavioral tells that show when you don't have it. And that's why I'm glad we put these chapter summaries in, the debriefings at the end of them. I remember years ago, when I first got into self-education through reading, I was going through the undercover school for the FBI, and we had this great guy got up there, and he's a senior guy, and he said, "Yeah, all these classes you're going through are fantastic," but he held up Dale Carnegie's How to Win Friends and Influence People. And he said, "This is what you do. You read this book, you go practice, you debrief yourself, and you do it again." And the thing I loved about Dale Carnegie's book was, at the end of every chapter was a 1-page summary of the key points of that chapter, and that became my crib notes. And so literally, I'm sitting here with you today. I have each one of my chapter debriefings in front of me, because it's rich content, and you need to keep your mind fresh of this stuff and keep practicing it. So that's why I wanted it in there.
I'm gonna wade a little bit into dangerous waters here.
Sure.
There is, of course, the impeachment going on. Love it, loathe it. There are conversations, love or loathe Trump. There are conversations happening that I think your book actually addresses, which I find fascinating for the time that we're in. But one of the things you talk about is the fact that when you are building rapport, it's about going in and saying, "Hey, what can I offer this person?" And you give great examples of one gentleman named Leo. His son was going through health issues, and so you were able to help keep him in a safe place so that he could get over those issues. You talk about other people, and we throw these terms around like quid pro quo, where it's like, "Hey, I'll do this if you scratch my back." What's the difference between that and this? Because I think there is, and I just want to discuss that for a moment.
So a lot of times people will do things for people with the intention of that they're going to reciprocate.
Yes.
And so if you're doing that with the use of deception or subterfuge or a pretext in some way, that to me is manipulation, because you're trying to control a situation. You're trying to get them to do something. And what you offer is conditional. And so for me, the way I ensure that, as I am 100% anti-manipulation in any form. And so one way that I do that, I have these 3 end goals and anchors that I use in every single engagement with every human being I ever have. And my number one goal in every situation is a healthy professional relationship. Yeah. Above all else, because nothing can move forward without that healthy relationship. I always liken it like this. You can have the greatest genetics and biology on the planet. You can be the smartest man or smartest woman. But without relationships, you might as well be a moron on top of a mountain by yourself, because nothing can move forward. So number 1 is relationships. Number 2 is open, honest communication and transparency, because you cannot have healthy relationships without open, honest communication and transparency. And thereby, that's a fail-safe that starts alleviating any attempt at manipulation, because manipulators do not use transparency. And my third is be an available resource for the success and prosperity of others, with no expectation of reciprocity. And there's that fail-safe in there again, saying I'm not being a resource for your success in anticipation that you're going to do something for me. Now, if I'm transparent with my priorities, if you want to, that's great, but I have no expectation whatsoever. And that's the difference between, manipulators and people that are inspirational leaders. And you hit at the beginning too. You use that word persuasion. Yeah. I'm actually anti-persuasion now as well, because persuasion is still about me getting you to do what I want you to do. It's the same thing as the word convincing someone of something. I don't. I use words inspiration, because convincing and persuasion is about the things I want. Inspiration is about you discovering the things that you want and me giving you resources for that.
Often we're looking for immediate resolution. I want this, so what's the quickest path to getting that? And you talk about in the book that in many times these relationships were ones that you were cultivating for years.
Absolutely.
Without expectation. And even after that, of course, based on what you're saying here, there wasn't an expectation of like, hey, you're going to give up the details that we're longing for just because we're buddies now. You were playing for the long game, and that's not something our society teaches. Our society wants the instant. Talk to us a little bit about patience in this process.
Yeah, patience is key, and that's because one of the controls that people try to have over other people is the control of time. And again, if you try to control time, that's manipulation again, because it's an attempt of control. Now, if you're transparent about it, though, then it's a mitigator, because you say, hey, listen, we do have a big crisis going on right now. I need something right now, and here's the reasons why. Is that something you think you might be able to do for me? Because again, I was transparent about the fact that I have a time constraint on these things. But in general, the tempo and the pace of a relationship is based on the other person. They're the one that control that. You can do a few things to try to accelerate. I call them relationship intensifiers that you can attempt. And they're nothing more than frequency of getting together and communicating. The more frequent that you get together, and basically that's in giving them more opportunities to be valued and feel affiliated with you. If you do the proximity thing, also comes into play. Are you communicating via text, via email, or in person? The in-person one actually will intensify the relationship better and faster than if you're doing it via text. And the third is intensity. Intensity, in other words, the topics of conversation that you're talking about. Are we talking about the weather? Or are we talking about World War III? Yeah. So it's those types of things that they can be accelerators, but again, it takes patience, because it is totally up to the other person. I love this analogy I give a lot too, and that is, when I retired, I had 7 confidential human sources. These were 7 great patriots that were sharing information and do all they could to protect national security of the United States. And I always say I'd rather have 7 people give me 120% of their effort willingly than 100 people give me 5% reluctantly, that you pressured into a relationship. There was never ever any pressure, because if you don't want to have a conversation with me, whether it's if we're talking professionally at work, then I won't force it, because again, like you said, it's got to be up to them. You have to have patience.
As we wrap up this first segment, we always ask a few questions. The first one being, how are you finding purpose in what you do?
It's the easiest thing in life. When I discovered that relationships are the key to everything, my purpose is sharing with people. like me that weren't born natural leaders. I was born a natural self-centered narcissist.
I think we all are.
No, some people have this stuff down pretty amazingly. My wife is one of them, that she's a natural, person that people love talking to and sharing things with because she doesn't judge. She seeks thoughts and opinions and she doesn't judge. Jesse Thorne, my mentor in the book, he was the same way. So I always, my purpose is to have people understand why those people are so awesome so you can start adding those behaviors to yourself to building those good, healthy relationships.
For you, you are in a new season of life and you've had a career. You started out at the Naval Academy, you moved on to the U.S. Marine Corps, and then you end up in the FBI, and now you're in this new season. So what's one challenge you're currently working to overcome in this new season?
Being a one-man show.
It's tough, isn't it?
Yeah. Being your own web designer, marketer, publicist, as well as I'm good on my content, but the rest of it is I need a staff and, I can't afford one. Because I'm a moron.
Our final question in the segment is, what is the next big dream, idea, or goal you have?
So I have a free online course I offer right now. My goal for the next year is I have 3 more I'm trying to get out, that are scaling up. It's just putting my content in multiple types of venues for more accessibility to people.
Well, we're going to take a break right here, and when we come back, we're going to go deeper into this conversation. I'm going to ask Robin about working in New York City on 9/11. We're going to talk more about his experiences. It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll be right back. Here at jumbleThink, one of our passions is story. So much so that we've included it in our tagline, jumbleThink, the story of ideas. And through the podcast, we get to talk to incredible people like Robin Dreeke about his experience as an FBI agent. We've talked to former Olympians. We've talked to actors. We've talked to authors. We've talked to entrepreneurs. All of their lives embrace story, how they took ideas and made that into a story. I'm super excited to invite you to join me at something called Story Expo. It's coming up in early March in New York City. And Story Expo is all about bringing together masters of story, from writers to Hollywood producers to comic book authors to podcasters. There are a lot of incredible people coming together in this event all around story. I'm actually going to be sharing on 2 topics at this event. The first one is the story of ideas and what that means. And then I'm also doing a presentation on podcasting, how to craft your stories. I want to invite you along for this journey. I want to invite you to join us at Story Expo. All you have to do is head on over to storyexpo.com where you can register and shoot me an email, hello@jumblethink.com, and let me know you're coming. Let's grab lunch or coffee or just, grab some time together at this incredible event. Stories are how we encapsulate our ideas. They are how we communicate these ideas, and they're ultimately some of the best driving forces to encouraging others to join us on the journey of the ideas that we have. So join me at Story Expo this March by going on over to storyexpo.com. Now let's return to our conversation with today's guest, Robin Dreeke. We are back with Robin. All right, Robin, before we go much deeper, there is probably one of the most important questions that I need to ask, and that is, how can people find and connect with you?
Really simply and easily, you can go to my website, which is peopleformula.com, all one word, peopleformula.com. And on there, I try to provide as many resources as I can for others, scaling all the way from costing nothing. If you want to watch my YouTube videos, doing some keynotes, to podcasts like this one, I try to create all the links for those on there, as well as the free online course, which is 10 Techniques of Quick Rapport, and then scaling all the way up to if you want to pay me boatloads of money. It's all on there. I
will make sure all those links are in the episode notes. So wherever you're listening, You can find them probably right below where you're listening. So go click them. You should really do it because there's some great resources there. When you were sharing before we got on, you were talking about that this is the most difficult book or project that you've worked on from the standpoint of preparation, putting the ideas together, just because of the complexity of the topic and how robust it is. There must have been something along the way that became illuminated that you may have missed before, or something that you just went, oh, wow, I didn't know this as well as I thought. What was that lesson that you learned from this book?
I think it really was really taking that intuition and categorizing it, because I didn't really, a lot of times in the book I say, how to think like an FBI behaviorist, which I was doing, but I had learned it on the job, so it's that old OJT, on the job training, because I'm basically trying to be like my mentor and guide. Yeah. What happened was, so after I wrote the Code of Trust, which keeps forcing you to focus on other human beings, that's when I was like, oh, I think I can start predicting what people are doing. And I look back in hindsight, I was like, yeah, in most of these situations, I was using that intuition, that we talked about. And then, I said, well, I really want to share this with others. I have a great friend of mine, Joe Navarro, wrote the book, What Everybody is Saying, nonverbal expert. And he's always a big proponent of, if you have at least one piece of information you think someone else could benefit from, shame on you if you don't get it out to them. So he's always a big proponent of sharing. So I was like, I think I can do this because, predicting other people's behavior is really as simple as understanding what they think is in their best interest and just figuring that out. And then if you offer your resources for them to be successful in those areas, you're going to have a relationship. I got really tasked, with my editor, Nikki, who's fantastic, and Penguin, to make it really, really granular. He said, get down in the weeds. And so I came up with these 6 signs. I said, there are your 6 signs. And then, no. Explain those 6 signs. And I was like, okay. And it was so that was where, being forced to really get granular and do those deep dives on each one of the signs, that was illuminating. Because all these things we talk about with behavior of human beings, it's what I always call the elusive obvious. I hope you got that when you read, the book so far, is that, oh, that's common sense. That makes sense. It's given labels and meanings to things that we're doing every day and things that we're seeing every day, but we don't recognize it because it doesn't have label and meaning. I call it the new car effect. The day you buy a new car, all of a sudden you start recognizing that same make and model everywhere. Yeah. Without even trying, because it has a label and meaning. So that's what this is about. So the more I gave labels and meanings to the 10 tells for and 10 tells against, and the 6 signs, and you start recognizing it everywhere. So I always call it clearing the fog. All these things are always in front of you, but it was never clear. So that was probably the most illuminating for me, was the amount of depth of each one of those signs.
I think for me, one of the big takeaways, if you don't mind that I share.
Oh, absolutely.
Is that often the answer is simply the ask. And time and time again, and I want to get into stories in a second because you tell some great stories. You simply were asking the right question. What can I help you with? Mm-hmm. Are you in a rush? You were asking the obvious question that most people ignore, and by bringing it into the light, it made the relationship more real, more tangible, and more even, because there wasn't anything in the weeds that were being kind of hidden. I think of like your lunch with Leo down in Lower Manhattan, and how you kind of saw he was shifting and uncomfortable looking at his watch, and you simply just asked, hey, do you have a time commitment that I need to know? Because if you do, then I really want to honor it. And by doing that, you built that trust.
Yeah, because you made the conversation about him. And that's what all comes down to. Every time you interact with a human being, are you making it about yourself, or are you making it about them? Here's another guarantee. If you're not talking in terms of the other person's priorities, of what's important to them, they're only humoring you at best. They're not listening or paying attention. People care about what their thoughts and opinions are and what their priorities are. So it's and people aren't never looking for you to be perfect. They're looking for you to make an effort. Yeah. And just by merely, recognizing if someone's giving off some stress indicators non-verbally, whether they're eyebrow compression, they're looking at the watch, they're angling their body to get away from you, they're frowning, they're grimacing, any of these things, I always ask, I first start with, I'm so sorry. Did I do something that made you uncomfortable? Because it's not me saying, hey, what's wrong with you? No, it's me saying, hey, it's my fault. What am I doing, and what can I change for you to make this a more pleasant experience for you? So I always, if someone's giving it off or if they're sharing it verbally, that means they're willing to talk about it. So I engage it. And not a confrontation, just make it about them. Got to make it about them.
The other thing that stood out to me, and maybe I'm misunderstanding it, so if I am, please clarify it for me. You talk about people who live in the middle ground. They don't have opinions about things. They don't have opinions about whether it's politics or religion, or they overshare at the wrong times, that those are markers of untrustworthiness.
I think, because I'm one of those people, I have my own personal opinions, but I know most of the world does not want to know my personal opinions. Because if I'm going to, and I think there's a difference. If you're in the middle of the road because you simply aren't engaged with the world, that's one thing. But if you're in the middle of the road because you're consciously making sure you don't offend anyone or get someone emotionally hijacked, I think that's a different thing. That's where I fall. There's a guarantee. If as soon as you take a side, half the world's going to line up against you and get very angry at you. And if your goal is to build relationships and have open, honest communication with everyone you engage, or at least to the best of your knowledge, because not everyone's going to want it anyway. But if you take a side, you're going to lose half those people. Yeah. So, I mean, I have my personal views on things, but they're always open to new information coming in and assuading them. Mm-hmm. I have a great friend of mine. He's a matter of fact, I mentioned him in the book a few times. His name's Jim, and he's a flight instructor, and he's about 15 years older than me, and he's a great guy, and he's an engineer. So he's a very, very stoic engineering, outlook on things and engaging someone. And I remember he's telling me a conversation 2 days ago where he's working for this guy. And Jim's been in this business a long time. He's been a flight instructor for, I think, 35 years. He knows what he's doing, and he knows about who to hire, not hire. And he's having a conversation about someone he wants to hire. And the owner was telling him all the reasons why he didn't think that person should be hired. And instead of Jim digging in his feet and disagreeing with him because of his experience, because of his ego and vanity, he said at the end of the conversation that, you made a lot of good, valid points. I don't want to hire him now either. Wow. And it just really struck me. And I said, how'd you do that? Because that's exactly what we're talking about in these books, about not having a closed mind and being open to new information coming in. And basically the guy, through keeping his brain opened and information coming in, he totally flipped his belief on something because he allowed it. Wow. Yeah, so I was pretty impressed by that. Yeah, that is super impressive. I've got to ask about 9/11. You were there. You were there through the process. You even had some of, what is it called, black lung disease? I don't know what I got. My wife is still trying. I'm in the health, World Trade Center health monitoring system. Yeah. I need to get up to. I got to go up to Alexandria. I got a brave going to DC to get my next checkup. But yeah, so I was down there inhaling all that garbage that has killed a lot of people. Yeah. Can you tell me maybe one story from that experience and the months after that just sticks in your mind? Maybe a story that most people would not have seen or experienced that. So, it's funny. Everyone's got something different that strikes them from events like that. And I talk about a couple of them in the book that are, the professional side, developing sources and everything. But I'll tell you, the thing that really stuck me the most was commuting down to New York every day with my buddy Jesse. We had to go through multiple checkpoints to get down to ground zero. And I remember it was the most remarkable thing I saw. Lining the streets of New York every single day in the West Side Highway were thousands upon thousands of people cheering and holding up signs. And it was, I get emotional now thinking about it. It was the most remarkable thing. And once you stopped your car at a checkpoint, you had to keep your windows down, because you were inundated with water coming in, respirators, homemade sandwiches, cookies. I mean, people were doing all they could to help. And I remember we were coming back, I think this is even in October. It's like months later, we're coming back from following a lead up at JFK Airport. And it was like, I think it was like 2:00 in the morning, freezing cold, raining hard. And I remember saying to the guys in the van with me, I said, I wonder if they're, and we called them the West Side guys. These were the people cheering right around Christopher Street on the West Side Highway.
Yeah.
24 hours a day. And no kidding, 3:30 in the morning in October, there they were, holding up candles and cheering as you went by. It was moving.
Wow.
And you felt, the thing is, you felt this severe, deep obligation to do something to save the world.
Yeah.
Because you had so many people that expected you to, and it was, moving, very moving.
We're living in a time where we're hyper-critical of everyone and everything, and it's really sad.
Yep.
And I know that there is a lot of tension between certain political factions, but also in popular culture about the view of government and the FBI specifically. As a person that's been on the inside, what would you want the public to know?
Just what you see in the news a lot of times, and the fact that, don't judge organizations by a few bad apples. Whether you're for or against my executives, inside, before I retired, our thought process was very simple. If you lie, you're fired. It just comes down to that, because the only way you maintain public trust, and that's in any organization, but especially if you're in a law enforcement organization, you can't lie. You can't, we have all these processes and protocols in place for checks and balances to keep things from getting biased and to keep people from lying and to uphold the law. I'd say the greatest thing that the FBI was really, really good at, and still is we are massive believers and adherents to the Constitution.
Yeah.
It is. And at my level, when I was on the street doing all this, the greatest thing is no matter whatever happened at the executive level or in public, what was really good is, as an organization, when we're actually interacting with our law enforcement partners, with the communities, that was never shaken. I never had an issue, during any of what was going on, which was great. People would ask about it, kind of like you are, and I'd say, well, luckily that doesn't touch me in my world. And even and the funny thing is, I worked counterintelligence, my entire career, and I knew some of those people, and yeah, they got in groupthink, and again, whether you agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. They lied, and you can't lie.
Wow. Okay. I'm going to ask one final question as we wrap up this segment, and it has little to do with your book, but everything to do with some of the stories you tell in there. You talk about spies and espionage and intelligence, and I never think of the FBI as that agency. I always think of the CIA.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of surprised me. So I know that you were an FBI agent. That's where you worked. How different are the CIA and FBI?
So here's the difference. The CIA is OCONUS. They're overseas, so they're overseas intelligence collectors. Granted, they have a domestic component as well, but we are, and the FBI is a domestic intelligence organization,
right? And
so they handle finding positive intelligence overseas for our national security information gaps. And FBI, what we are primarily is counterintelligence. In other words, we are countering the efforts of foreign spies on American soil.
Right.
And so 99% of the time, those are diplomats under diplomatic cover that are also, spies, to put it easier. But yeah, they're intelligence officers trying to collect information and trying, which basically when they collect things against the United States, it generally is going to undermine our economy first and foremost, because if they're getting proprietary information that costs us millions of dollars to research, and they take someone out to dinner for a couple $100 and get it that way, then that undermines our economy and also our national security if it has anything to do with force protection, troop protection, all that kind of stuff. So we're in a world of countering that. But yeah, all the hooky spooky spy stuff you see in movies with fake rocks and dead drops. Yep. I saw a lot of it. It still goes on every day.
Wow. So it's not, you see the movies and you think it's just Hollywood making it up. There's some truth to that.
Oh, there's lots of truth to that. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, when I was in New York alone, we handled numerous operations that we were actually controlling, double agent operations that the Russians thought they were under control of, but we actually had them. Yeah. I mean, some of these ran for like 20 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy.
It's pretty funny. Yeah. I've seen a lot of fake rocks. They're pretty funny. They're pretty cool. With cash in them and everything else. Yeah.
You talk about little bugs, helicopter kind of things and all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's gotten crazy now too, just because technology has gotten to make it even easier. I mean, I do a lot for the Innocent Lies Foundation, which is a group that I'm a board member of, which we uncover online pedophiles. And so we're always given information about how to protect our children. And the apps on phones and stuff our children are using are high-level spycraft if they're trying to hide something from you. It's amazing the stuff that's out there.
Wow. Another conversation for another day.
Yes.
We're going to take a break right here. And when we come back, we're going to do rapid fire questions. Chasing big ideas and dreams is really hard to do, and it's especially hard to do it when you do it alone. Why not join the jumbleThink community and join a community of dreamers just like you who are on the pursuit of taking their dreams and ideas and making them a reality? How do you do it? Head on over to jumbleThink.com where you'll find a place where you can sign up for our email newsletter. You'll also find links to our Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter pages. Head on over, jumbleThink.com. Let's connect and let's chase those big ideas and dreams together. Now let's jump into rapid fire questions with today's guest, Robin Dreeke.
Pour mettre l'aiguille sur le disque. Mettez le contact, reposez votre bras et attendez. Restez calme.
We are back with Robin. Are you ready for rapid fire questions?
Let's see if I am.
Right. As a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Astronaut.
What is one tip you'd give someone with a big idea or dream and they don't know where to start?
Start with relationships that you think you're going to need in order to fulfill it.
What is one challenge, or what is one change you'd like to see in the world?
People valuing relationships above things.
That's good. What do you want your legacy to be?
He did all he could for others with all he had.
Where do you find inspiration?
My children.
What is one book you think every dreamer should read?
Every dreamer should read. Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People.
For you, how do you define success?
By the depth of relationships that I have.
What is one trend you're currently excited about?
Sharing of information.
What is one habit you find helpful in your life?
CrossFit.
Okay. Didn't foresee that one. All right. Got me thrown there. I did not predict that. I need to study your book better.
Me neither.
What is one thing you wish you would have known when you first started out?
That it's not about how you make yourself look. It's about how you make other people feel about themselves.
If you weren't doing what you're doing today, what do you think you'd be doing?
I can't imagine anything else.
That's good. That's a good place to be at.
Yeah.
What is one dream you're still wanting to fulfill in your own life?
Astronaut.
Well, it's not as far-fetched because of SpaceX and everything like that.
Also because of my son. My son is doing a lot of things that I wanted to do, but much better.
Wow.
And so I love living through him. And I'm not, it's living vicariously through his experiences is pretty remarkable.
Okay, I'm going to throw in a wild card there. Usually the dream is the last question I ask, but being that you are from the FBI, if people really wanted to know what the FBI was like, what is one book, what is one movie or TV show you say, this is something you have to see? This is like real life.
Ooh. I haven't seen anything on TV that is anything like it. I think there's a couple good books out there. I think reading any of Joe Navarro's books on nonverbal behavior gives a pretty good indication of things he's been through in the world of counterintelligence and terrorism. My books, I tell lots of stories.
Yeah.
My stories are fictionalized, to protect, national security, but they're all based on things I've done and methodologies and how I thought. I'd say some of these shows are good, like Criminal Minds and everything. The challenge is that, we don't have private jets we fly around on. I had a lot of United Airlines points. Office spaces are generally just look like every other office space in every other office. I mean, there's nothing cool on the walls. There's no great equipment that you get. Nah, just I'd say the most surprising thing I think people underestimate that I did in the FBI and that people do in the FBI, it really comes down to building relationships with people, because tools and techniques to become intrusive in a U.S. citizen or a U.S. person's life, like using overhears and FISA warrants and all that stuff, is a boatload of work that generally can be avoided if you have good information from good people.
Wow. Super cool. Okay, one more question about the book. I'm sorry, I got to ask this. I know that with a lot of books written by people who work in intelligence of any level have to go through a vetting process. Did you have to do that?
Oh, yeah.
How was that process for you?
I've been through it for each of my books. This last one for this book, it was grueling because I write with Cam Stouth, a great writer, and he is such a good writer. And we infused the real stories and my real experiences from 9/11 and the Robert Hansen spy case in here. But what I did was I had him research it on his own from open sources, so none of it came from me, except the 9/11 experiences, so that everything is fictionalized so that we could make it through the process. But the problem was when I gave it to pre-publication review of the Bureau, they're like, this is all real. We can't let any of this go. And I said, look any of it up. I said, there's not one true name in this entire book. They're all the names are fictionalized to protect people. All the nations, all the events are like if you were part of my life and you're part of one of these cases, you're going to read and you're going to recognize, oh, that's me. And then all of a sudden it goes sideways. And that didn't happen that way because I've spliced all these things together so that it is real, but it's fictionalized real. So So that process is grueling because they literally thought everything was true.
Wow.
And everything's true-ish is a good way to put it.
Which means that you and Cameron did a good job of doing your job.
Yeah, that's our job. My job is to get content out there, and we put all these real stories in there, but they're fictionalized in a way that you have no idea who is what. I mean, Jesse Thorne, that's not his real name. Leo, that's not Leo's real name for the source. My great mentor and guide. Now, granted, the real Leo in real life, he had been a bureau source for 25 years. He had 16 handlers before me, and he's like a grandfather. Wow. He was experienced, boy. I enjoyed working with him, and I remember when I got the phone call when he died and passed on. It was emotional. It was tragic.
Did he give you a rifle?
Yeah, it was gifted to me. Yeah, it was a shotgun. Yep.
Okay, I remember that from the book. So that is real.
I have it upstairs.
Wow.
Yeah.
Robin, we could talk for hours. The stories that I'm sure you could tell and the stories that you can't tell are fascinating for sure. As we wrap up, what's your final thought for us today?
So I love leaving a call to action for people if you do want to start down the path of building these relationships and being able to assess and understand others. First, and you mentioned it during the broadcast, don't judge. See people's greatness. You want to add a new behavior to yourself today. Find what they're awesome at, whether it's professionally or personally. Find their greatness and focus on that instead of what's wrong with them. Because another guarantee is we're all insecure about something. Let go of that. Second, once you do that, discover their priorities. If you can find out what their top 3 priorities for them are, personally and professionally, and you start seeing how you can be a resource for their success in those areas, you're going to start seeing your relationships start shifting around.
Wow. Good stuff. Robin, thank you so much for taking time out. I love your book. And also thank you for your service to our country, both in the Marines and through the FBI. I know there's probably a lot of sacrifices that we will never understand that you and your family both endured through 9/11 and after that. So thank you for all you've done for us, especially the stuff that we'll never know and understand.
Well, thank you so much for having me on, Michael. It was a truly enjoyable hour. Appreciate it.
Once again, we want to thank Robin Dreeke for taking time out and being on today's show. Head on over to jumbleThink.com or check the episode notes on links on where you can find and connect with Robin. And you really should go check out his new book, Sizing People Up. One of my biggest takeaways from today's conversation, and by reading Robin's new book, was the simple reminder that we need to focus on others more than ourselves. Often we wonder why we don't feel like we fit in, or we wonder why people don't seem to understand us. And often it comes down to perspective of self over others. And in our culture of self-indulgence, in our culture of I want what I want and I want it when I want it, we often lose compassion, the understanding, the love for others, to put them ahead of ourselves. Simply by changing this perspective, by repointing our focus off of ourselves and onto the dreams, the ideas, the desires of others, we can unlock new possibilities for our own dreams, for our own ideas, for our own story. So for you today, I hope that was your takeaway. And I truly do hope that you read Robin's book. It gives you some great insights on how you approach others, how you build that trust, and how you build authentic relationships that bring value for years to come. Value not only for yourself, but for the other person. So what are you going to do today? What is it that you will do in this journey of your dreams and ideas? How will you step forward? How will you embrace the people around you to invite them into your story and to become part of their story? Dreams and ideas, as I said before, often are hard to achieve because we isolate. We put our own needs, our own desires, our own passions ahead of others, and in that we lose our connection to the world around us. So today, as I would typically say and close the show, what is the step you're going to take forward? But instead, I'm going to take and say, step back today. Reflect on your journey. Reflect on how you're embracing others in your journey, and think about how you can change that, how you can not make it about your story, but our story, how you can make it about bringing value to the other people you serve, how you can put them ahead of your own wants and desires. And ultimately that will open up some of the dreams and ideas you have to become more possible. Now it's your turn to get out there, to dream big, and to change the world around you.
En avant, en arrière, sur les côtés. Vous êtes une autre personne. Les mères de famille, les enfants, peuvent également prendre un moment revitalisant. Dans quelques mois, lorsque vous aurez bien saisi la technique et que vous serez maître de votre corps, vous pourrez vous décontracter même en travaillant.